Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Dr. Sam Sanders. Dr. Sanders is the college chair for the University of Phoenix School of Business and former human resources executive. The University of Phoenix is an institution of higher learning that has 112 campuses worldwide. Sam, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, we met, I think, about a month ago, and, we sat down and talked, and I understand, we talked about a survey that you recently completed, which is very interesting, and it had to do with self-worth and our careers. I was wondering, to kind of kick things off, can you share a little bit about what you found in your study?
Sure. We did a survey. University of Phoenix School of Business did a national survey with more than 1,000 working adults, and it indicated that careers contribute equally or more to self-worth as personal lives for nearly half of the U.S. employees. And the survey reveals that nearly half of the working adults in the U.S. gain equal or greater feelings of self-worth from their jobs and careers as they do from their personal lives.
Wow, that's wild. And so how does that translate into, people being willing, or people who are still sort of looking for, finding their purpose at their job?
People are finding that if their job is not aligning with their personal values, they're willing to leave the company. As a matter of fact, the recent University of Phoenix survey revealed that more workers are willing to leave a job if they feel it does not add to their self-worth. Despite a challenging economic climate, more than 60% of the working adults would quit their job if it decreased their feeling of self-worth.
Wow. So for those people who are, kind of not feeling fulfilled in their career, is that the trend that you're noticing? Is that the career needs to be aligned to their values, or?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the survey even found that 37% of the working adults in the U.S. plan to change their careers in the next 2 years. And the youngest workers are the most interested in transition, with about 66% of them in their 20s still searching for the right careers, and 55% planning to change careers in the next 2 years. But the good news is that education is evolving every day, and professionals have more options to pursue for their personal and professional growth, including formal education and continuing education and certificates and corporate training, mentorship, or personal growth projects.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I think on one hand, it makes a lot of sense that the folks who are younger would be even more open to this kind of change. But on the flip side, I keep reading about how people in their 20s are going home to live with mom and dad. So I think it's interesting that they are the ones who are still more comfortable with this kind of change.
Right. And I think part of it is the fact that because they're younger and they figure that they have time to get it together, they're willing to jump out there and make a change because they can go back and possibly live with mom and dad if it doesn't work out.
That's true. They still have a little bit of a safety net there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, in my coaching practice, I encounter a number of people actually who have been willing to quit their job, sometimes even before they have another job lined up. And you kind of touched on that a little bit. But, this seems really to be the case when the person is feeling unfulfilled, which is what you really looked into with your survey. I mean, did you find similar results? Are you seeing people also who are, quitting their jobs even before they have something else lined up?
No, absolutely. And it varies based on the age group. As a matter of fact, 63% were in their 30s, and 50% in their 40s, and 35% in their 50s, and 31% in their 60s. So it across all generations. They're finding that that if they're not being fulfilled, and they feel that they don't have self-worth with their current position, they're willing to take a chance and step out and go out there. And with the economy being in its present state, they're still willing to go out and look for other opportunities because they put more value in their careers than they do their personal lives.
Wow.
So it's very important for employers to foster a workplace where their employees can feel that their careers align with their values and contribute to a feeling of self-worth.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Did you notice, do the folks that are more willing to leave with no other job, are they people who are single or married? I mean, have you noticed a trend at all as you've talked to people?
There's really no particular trend. Of course, needless to say, just from personal experience and exposure, those with dual income are more inclined to feel more comfortable in doing it because they feel that they have a backup plan. But the survey took into consideration, across those who were single as well as those who were in established relationships.
Okay.
And distinguish between either.
Okay, that makes sense. So, how I know that with maybe our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation, employees plan to stay at a job for a very long time and they plan to retire from that job. How long, are you noticing that people stay at a particular job? I mean, since they're constantly kind of searching, how frequently do you notice that people change?
Well, I think that people are really looking for changes when not only if they feel unfulfilled, but as they continue to grow professionally and academically, if they're getting new skills and new and additional education, they want to utilize to utilize what they actually gain to capitalize on the fact that now I bring to the table more skills, more competencies. So I'm willing to move on now if I cannot be fulfilled in my current position. I don't want to go back to school and get additional education just to come back to work and do the same thing. I expect to not only grow in my knowledge, but grow in my position. And if I can't get that with my current employer, then I need to go outside of the organization and look. So companies are realizing that they have to do something more to promote fulfillment with their employees. So they are doing more to open up opportunities and set up programs such as succession planning to ensure that there are opportunities within their organization so that they won't lose the good talent.
Right. Well, that actually kind of leads me to a question. I was wondering, what suggestions do you have on the employer side about things that an employer could do to help those, values more closely aligned to try to help them, continue to retain employees?
Well, Angela, I'm glad you asked that question. There are some things that employers can do, such as provide the employees with professional development opportunities and advanced educational resources. That's one great way to help them to promote fulfillment within their organization, to also provide resources such as training, be it online, be it stand-up training, face-to-face, but they have to provide some type of carrot to show them that we value you enough to invest in you. So they're not only promoting education, but also internally, but also training programs that can help the employees to improve their competencies.
Okay, that's great. Are you noticing that a lot of people who, increase their education and then choose to move on, are those people who are funding their education on their own, or are there companies paying for them to go back and get more education?
It's a mixture. It's
Okay.
a mixture.
Well, I would think someone who was funding their own education might be more compelled to leave once they had it, but I was just curious.
Well, I will say that those who are funding their own, they want to make sure that they capitalize on their investment. Those who are receiving tuition reimbursement, they tend to have more of a carrot to stay. That's part of that educational package that the employers are providing. and they typically will have them to make some type of commitment to the organization if we help to fund your education. So if you leave the organization, you will, within a certain period of time from you taking a class, then you would have to pay the company back on a prorated scale. So that there is that handcuff to keep them there. But once again, if the employees feel that they're not being self-fulfilled and they don't add self-worth, then they will be willing to take the hit and just go ahead and leave.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So this actually leads me into another question. When we talked a few weeks ago, one of my favorite things that we talked about was really being an entrepreneur of your own career, even when you work in a corporate environment. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and why you think it's important?
Absolutely. There are some things that working adults can do to promote their own self-worth through their careers. And as you stated, and we talked about this before, being an entrepreneur of their own careers, they shouldn't wait to be handed opportunities within their organization, but be proactive and find ways to stand out within their existing job. This can include working with teams in the organization or researching other streams of revenue, conducting competitive analysis, or presenting a new project. Suggesting innovative changes and taking charge of their own development may lead to increased responsibility and ultimately greater feelings of self-worth.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I think sometimes job seekers have kind of, just sat and waited for their company to sort of promote them. And I think those people who really take the initiative are the ones who, are able to move forward in their career, whether it's at their current organization or another organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are some other things that working adults can do to promote their own self-worth, such as understand how their job ties to the bottom line. And doing that, then they're understanding how their role fits into the larger picture and can change the way that they approach it and their position in terms of their accomplishments. Even if it's not in their job description, being aware of how their role and department contributes to the organization's business priorities and bottom line may help them to prioritize and contribute more effectively and feel greater job satisfaction. So they need to understand what I'm doing to contribute to the bottom line. And that actually gives them more sustainability within the organization. I tell my students at University of Phoenix how important it is for them to show their employer how they can impact the bottom line by either bringing in revenue, positively impacting revenue, and or reducing cost.
That's a great point. So where do you suggest that they go to research this kind of information?
Well, they can do this by understanding the vision of the organization and the mission. The vision being, where's the company trying to go in the future? Where do they see themselves in the future? And the mission is, what are the steps to get there? What are we going to do now to get to the future, to get to our vision? And when they do that, they can do a self-assessment in terms of, what do I bring to the table? Do I understand the business? It's not good enough anymore just to know your job, but you need to understand the big picture and find ways of capitalizing on your competencies and your skill sets and your knowledge, and continue to gain additional knowledge of how what you do contributes to the bottom line of the organization. So it's going to take some researching skills.
So once you have it, I think this is a great point. And, often, understanding the value that you bring to the organization can show that you're really aligned to the company's goals overall, and it can really show the value that you bring. But I know it can be a sensitive topic to talk about with your manager or with, the management at your company, especially if you've never done it before. Do you have any tips that you give to students? They've figured out how much revenue that they're generating for the company, and, now what do they do? How do they present that back to the company?
Without making their manager feel threatened, and because that seems to be a common theme that some employees are uncomfortable going to their frontline manager because they feel that their manager may feel intimidated by them because they may know more than what their manager knows. But what they can do is to come up with creative ideas, sit down with their manager and say, hey, I want to be a contributor to this team. I want to be a contributor to the organization. And here's some things that I figured that I can do to make us stronger as a team. Not even approach it necessarily as the organization, but let's address it here within our team first. That way you can get your supervisor or your manager to be on the same page. And then go into the bigger picture, because a lot of times if you were to approach your manager and say, here are some things that I think that we could do to help the organization, and you haven't even addressed your immediate needs or your immediate team, then you will probably lose the connection with your manager. So connect with your manager first at the local level, i.e. the team level or the department level, and then broaden the scope to more of a strategic, long-term, big picture view.
I totally agree. And I think you made a good point about approach your manager first or you may become disconnected. I actually counseled a close friend last year who, they did know more than their manager. And when they approached their company with this type of information, they actually went to their manager's manager thinking that would be better because they had more respect for that person in terms of knowledge, and they got along well with the person. And doing that, although it strengthened the relationship with the manager's manager, it actually totally alienated their direct boss. And
that is very common.
And they actually ended up, this person after it happened ended up switching companies. I mean, it was their own decision, but they felt that relationship had just been so damaged, with their direct boss that they didn't know how to fix it. So I totally agree with where you're coming from.
And because of that reason, many organizations have a process called better known as open door policy, where they encourage you, they promote in their culture that you first start with your manager and work your way up, and don't avoid trying to go over your manager's head, because as you and I recognize, you can alienate yourself from your manager, and you don't want to damage that relationship. If you go to your manager first, your manager may serve as a wonderful ally to help you go even higher within the organization. But there tends to be a lack of trust from the manager once you go over your manager's head. All it takes is one incident like that, and it really can damage your relationship with your frontline manager.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think you have to realize that whether you respect your manager or you don't, they still have a lot of decision-making power over you. And, if they have a good manager themselves, if your boss has a good boss, they're not going to be encouraging employees to skip over, their direct boss. So, it typically doesn't result in very good things if you try to do that.
You're right. We even have a course here at University of Phoenix for critical thinking.
Okay.
And we address that in that course at the graduate level as well as the undergraduate level to make sure that you realize the consequences in the actions that you take.
Right. And, it's not always about technical knowledge on a subject. For example, if you're a computer programmer and your boss isn't as good of a programmer as you are, well, they're not necessarily there to be the best computer programmer, but they are there to help decide what your salary is and how much vacation you have and things that really directly impact your life and your lifestyle.
Yeah, that's right. I had an incident that happened to me early in my career where I reported to the chief financial officer. This is when I was director of human resources before I became a vice president. And, my chief financial officer was very knowledgeable financially, but he really didn't understand and have an appreciation for the human resources aspects of the organization. Everything was bottom line driven, but I recognized the fact that I wanted to get to our president, but I recognize the fact that I would be committing professional suicide
Sure.
if I didn't at least connect with my direct manager, who was the
Right.
chief financial officer, and I was not willing to set that battle up at all. So what I did was I set up a meeting to let him see what I was working on and to make sure that he understood my side of the house from a human resources perspective, and to let him feel that and understand that I still needed his support and assistance because he was the financial expert, and some of the recommendations that I wanted to have implemented at the corporate level, it would take financing. So I needed his buy-in. I needed his partnership. So I made this a partnership, and he and I went to the president together, and we were able to convince him and get a strong justification, and we were able to implement the plan that I had laid out. But had I tried to avoid him and just go straight to the president, who was very transformational, I would have got kudos from the president, but from my direct manager, the chief financial officer, he would have tried everything to block it because that's his personality.
Yeah, and you have to
And he would
understand
have felt
that.
left out.
Oh, that's such a great example. I mean, it sounds like you had really different perspectives, but you both in the end were able to bring, your different points of view and your different strengths together to kind of drive this forward.
Absolutely. And a lot of organizations have this, like I mentioned earlier, this open door policy, and they know that if you were to go to the president, the first thing, or your manager's manager, the first thing that person should ask you is, did you talk to your manager about it? What did he or she say? So they should direct you back to that person. So why not just go ahead and start there in the beginning, and you will find that you will keep a good working relationship within your team, and you stand a greater chance of accomplishing the end results when you have more support.
Oh, absolutely. So a lot of kind of what we're talking about here has to do with negotiation, whether it's, political negotiation or, other types. I'm curious, do you have suggestions that you give to your students about negotiating a raise or negotiating a job offer? Because these are some of the same people that you're talking to in that situation.
Yes, the first thing you have to do is to do your research, to understand the market and understand the range of the market. So it's going to mean you're going outside of just using your intranet within your organization. You have to do some research, just capitalize on your researching skills to find out what is the range for the position that you're talking about, and making sure that you have apples to apples. You're comparing the apples to apples as opposed to apples and oranges. And understand what you bring to the table and what you don't bring to the table. And when you do that, the best advice I give to my student is make sure that you write out the justification that your manager would normally process through for your raise. Oftentimes, managers are so overwhelmed with running the business, the day-to-day business, that they would prefer not to have to deal with the administrative duties. And what I would always coach my students to do at University of Phoenix is to write out the justification as though the manager is writing it on you. Sit down with your manager and explain to them the research that you've done, and this is what you bring to the table. Show them what you bring to the table and make sure that it is quantifiable and how it positively impacts the bottom line, as we mentioned earlier. And have it written in such a form that your manager can take that, maybe make a couple of minor edits, and pass it on through. But you've got to show how you impact the bottom line in a positive manner, and do your own research. And a lot of times it means you doing the research of your manager. I've had employees that say, well, I don't want to have to do that. That's my manager's job. No one is going to look after you like you're going to look after you. So you need to do the research on the manager's behalf, and the manager can add more to it, but let them see how serious you are and help them to understand what value you add to the organization's bottom line.
Right. Well, I think when it comes to, doing your job, you go in and you may do a quality job at whatever your normal role is, but this isn't an area that you typically think of as part of your job, but it's the one thing that impacts you the most. So
Absolutely.
I think you'd want to, take a little extra time and do this kind of research and presentation. Where do you recommend that people go to do this type of research?
They can go online on ONET. They can look at salary.com. There are a couple of salary surveys out there, the Mercer Report. There are various resources available. We have resources online at University of Phoenix under our career services to help our students to see what the market looks like in certain areas. But there are other resources outside of those who are students with the University of Phoenix to use, such as ONET and Salary.com and the Mercer Report and even the Hay Report.
Okay, that's great. That's very helpful. So when they have all this information and they realize, hey, I should be making 10% more or whatever the number is, how do you recommend, you kind of touched on this a little, but, I've spoken to folks in the past who may say, for example, I have a wife and I've got 2 children and I need more money to pay for my family. I mean, tell me, how should we be presenting this information?
That is a no-no. That is a no-no. Your personal issues should not be a variable in your justification for a salary increase. Mm-hmm. Once again, your justification should be based on quantifiable data. That you should be making more money because this is what this position pays, this is the range, this is what you bring to the table, this is how you impact the bottom line. It should be nothing related to your personal issues. As a matter of fact, with my HR background, I coach managers to dismiss the emotional and personal justification. Well, I think I should be, such as an employee saying I should be making more money because I have 3 kids and I have a wife who doesn't work. And, those are personal decisions. Mm-hmm. And that is the most unprofessional way to justify an increase. Go into your manager's office with quantifiable data based on proven researched information.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. So it sounds like they should also, put this information together in maybe like a presentation format or, an executive summary that their manager could easily present on their behalf without having to make too many changes. I mean, that sounds like what you're saying.
Right, exactly. And plus your manager will respond more if it's in writing. And that way he or she can analyze it, can stare at it, they can just let it sink in. But put it in a very professional form. Make sure that your information is accurate. Make sure that it's professionally put together and present it to your manager so that he or she can present it to their management team. Giving them as less work as possible, because what I have found, I have over 20 years of experience in human resources, the employee who will present their manager with something in writing that's already written up as though the manager wrote it has a greater chance of it being processed quicker, mm-hmm. as opposed to the employee going to his or her manager saying, this is what I found, and having that verbal conversation. It's good to have the verbal conversation, but have the document in hand as well. Because then if you're expecting the manager to put something together, it may or may not happen, mainly because they have so much on their plate that that's not high priority. Mm-hmm. Because they're there to run the business and to develop the personnel. And if it weren't for the Human Resources Department, a lot of raises would not even get processed because the managers are so overwhelmed with running the business. And with the economic climate being the way it is right now, with organizations downsizing, we're asking employees to do more with less. Less personnel, more work.
I think often when I work with clients who really prioritize a large financial, gain as very important, one thing I start to encourage them to do is to look for other jobs outside of their existing organization. And I don't know maybe what you've seen over the years, but my experience has just been that sometimes if what you're looking for is a significant increase in pay, sometimes, it's a little harder to get that internally than sometimes you can externally.
Angela, you are very much on point. You have to go outside of your box, outside of your comfort zone, because your organization may be set up in such a manner that they cannot afford, they don't have the budget to support what you're worth. So it may be time for you to make a change. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. Always look at other opportunities outside. And a lot of times, if you're happy with the organization, you don't want to leave the organization.
Right.
You tend to want to get what you want from that organization. But you have to set your priorities. What's important to you? If you feel that you are undercompensated and you are being told that there is no opportunity within your organization, then it is important for you to go outside and look so that you won't be disgruntled, because when you become disgruntled, what happens? You become less productive. When you become less productive, then your quality of life changes, and then even back to self-worth. Your self-worth, it's diminished.
No, I totally agree. And, I think it can be tough because sometimes if we've worked in a particular job for a very long time, we may think, well, this job, say if I'm a financial analyst, I may say, well, this job only pays, $50,000 a year, and that's all I'm going to get, whether I'm here or whether I'm at another organization. And I often encourage my clients to look at the overall company, because I've found that, different companies can afford to pay different amounts. And sometimes it's, the size of the company, the health of the company. Sometimes it's even, the types of products that company sells, and thinking about, do they sell little widgets where they make a small profit on each widget, or do they sell a product where they make a large amount of money on every product? And just realizing that you're not necessarily going to get the same pay for the same job at every organization. It really varies.
Absolutely. You're very much on point with that. It's kind of like when you think of a project manager. A project manager with one organization may make $40,000 a year. A project manager with another organization may make $140,000 a year. So that's such a wide range, a big delta, but it's based on, as you just so eloquently stated, the size of the organization, the revenue of the organization, the products and services, the demand of the products and services. So you can't just take a title and say, well, a project manager makes $140,000 a year. Well, based on this organization size, it may make 40.
I think that's a great point. And the thing that's interesting is a lot of folks don't realize that. I know you know that because you've been doing this for a very long time. And, you started in HR, and then you get to talk to lots of students who are professionals that are out working. But unless a job seeker compares notes or does research or kind of looks around, they won't really know, what is sort of their value in other organizations. And, I think that's even sometimes the advantage of interviewing, even if you aren't in a dire position where you need a job, but to get a sense for, what's my competitive value here? Am I really being compensated in a fair way, or a way that, aligns to what I'm looking for?
Right. And that goes back to the self-worth, and that supports the research that the School of Business at University of Phoenix did, and showing that people are willing to make that change because in their careers, because they don't have that self-worth with what they're doing there, and they recognize that there may be other opportunities in other organizations.
Absolutely.
That will give them more fulfillment.
I agree. So one other thing we talked about when we first met was, I know that you teach workshops on personal branding, which is really, one of my favorite topics. I'd love to just get a few tips from you on, why your personal brand is important to your job search, and, what a job seeker can do to constantly improve their personal brand.
Well, there are some things that when you talk about personal branding, it's all about marketing yourself. How do you market yourself? Career branding is the process of creating a recognizable professional name and reputation for yourself. So you have to, when you hear certain names, you think certain things. For example, if you hear Michelle Obama, you have a perception of whatever, be it good or bad, of Michelle Obama. You hear Oprah Winfrey, you hear Donald Trump. So they have a brand, a recognizable brand. And when you are trying to create your brand, you need to first do a self-assessment of what is it that you bring to the table. What are your competencies? And then after you realize what are your strengths, you do a SWOT analysis on yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? And what are your threats?
Okay.
On you personally. So do a SWOT analysis: strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And then you will try to position yourself of where is it that you are trying to go. And do your research and find out what is it what's out there. And you can start off by once you've identified what your SWOT analysis is, and once you've identified the area that you desire to go in, then you start putting information together about yourself, starting with your cover letter. Because the purpose of the cover letter, of course, is to have a potential employer to want to read your resume.
Yes.
And all of this is reflective of you and your brand. And when you do your cover letter, I tell my students all the time at University of Phoenix of how the importance of using keywords to identify themselves based on what the organization said that they are seeking in the job description and qualifications.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times we have individuals that miss the mark because they're trying to make the company fit their resume rather than their resume fit what the company needs. So they'll take this one resume that someone said, this is a great resume, and they'll send it out to everybody all over the country in hopes that it's like a dartboard, something perhaps will stick. But you have to, if you're really interested in an opportunity, you've got to customize your resume for that position. And I have this cover letter that I call a T cover letter, where you will give a one-page snapshot of you, i.e. your brand, and that will motivate the potential employer to read your resume. And it goes something like this. Let's say I'm applying for a project manager position, and I will put my heading on the cover letter with addressing it, do the research and find out who is the hiring manager and put a name on there. Why? Because when you get something to your residence that has your name on it, you typically open it because it was addressed to you, correct?
Oh, that's right.
When you have something that's sent to your residence and it's addressed to a resident, what do you do with that? You toss it in the trash because it wasn't personalized. So do some research and find out who is the hiring manager for that particular position, such as the project manager in the example that we're using now. And let's say it was Mr. James Jones, Director of Operations. Dear Mr. Jones, after reviewing the job description you have posted for the project manager position, set up two columns. In the left-hand column, you'll say you need, right-hand column, my experience. And you will take the top 3 to 5 descriptions of what they're looking for and qualifications and list them in the left-hand side of you need, worded exactly the way it is in the ad. And then you will match up on the right-hand side how you meet or exceed those qualifications. That way, you will show the person reviewing first of all, you will be recognized because we are posting positions online. And because of that, if you're not using the keywords, what they're looking for, you will be overlooked. So once you've been identified, now if someone reads it, they will have a snapshot of your brand and what you can do and who you are and show that you meet or exceed the qualifications, giving them a reason to want to read your resume. And you'll close that cover letter out with, I welcome the opportunity to meet with you to discuss how I may leverage my background and experience to assist you in achieving your organization's business needs. I may be reached at, and you give a professional email address, not hotmama@yahoo.com, but a professional that is based on your brand and your phone number, and close it out sincerely, Sam Sanders. Then you go to your resume, and you will make sure that you have some of the key phrases that they're looking for that applies to you in terms of you meeting the qualifications, so that you can be recognized as a viable option for their organization.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
part of your brand.
I couldn't agree more. I've had a conversation with a number of my clients who initially said, well, do I really need a cover letter? I mean, I have a resume, everything's in there. Or who decide to write a cover letter, but they choose not to write about themselves really in the cover letter because they say, well, this is all included in my resume. And, the feedback I give is very similar to what you just mentioned, which is kind of along the lines of, someone's going to read your cover letter or your resume. They may not read both. And often your cover letter is what convinces them to read the resume. So take the time to write it. You could be missing out on great opportunities that you'd otherwise, where doors might be open to you otherwise.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you something else that you have to be very careful of as you're talking about personal branding. Make sure that you are set up appropriately in social media. Nowadays, social media is the new background check for human resource professionals. Before I extend an offer to you for employment, oftentimes I will Google your name to see what's out there.
Right.
And people don't realize some of the things that you put on Facebook and it should be that's reflective of your brand. So make sure that you are approaching social media in a professional manner. I love LinkedIn because it's a professional platform, but ensure that you don't have any misspelled words, that you are looked at as a professional and not as a minor playing around on the internet.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think those are very important. I think it's very important what you put out there on social media, but I think it is also important to Google yourself, because what's interesting is more than one person probably has your name. And I've worked with a couple of clients who run into situations where, say, for example, there's a career criminal who lives in the same city as them. I actually encountered this recently, and who has the same name that they have. And so when you Google them, the very first thing that pops up is actually mugshots. And,
wow.
I think it's important to be careful about what you post, but it's important to be aware of what else exists about other people with your name, so that if a question does come up, you can address it, or you can work to do things like create a LinkedIn, which may show up above some of those negative results in the search engines.
Right. It's a very good point. Very good point. And another thing for them to keep in mind is for job seekers, for their brand, is their personal appearance when they go in for an interview. Make sure that you're dressed conservatively. And of course, my mother taught me as a child, dress for the position that you want, not the position that you have. So if you're seeking employment, make sure you go in there. Let them tell you, the employer to tell you, we have business casual. You dress in a business attire when you first go in, because you don't know what you're walking into. And then unless they should tell you that we wear just business casual and you're okay with that. But for those who are currently working somewhere and they want to be promoted, keep that in mind. As my mother would say, dress for the position that you want, not the position that you have. In my early 20s, my mom, we had business casual with the organization I was working. And on Friday we would have Jean Friday. And my mother would tell me, you shouldn't wear that to work. I said, well, Mom, it's business casual. She said, listen, they're going to treat you just like that, business casual.
Oh.
She said, if you want to move up in management, you need to dress like you are in management. So I would wear a tie to work at least 3 days a week. And, of course, I caught some slack from my colleagues. Who are you trying to impress, or do you have an interview today? And I just kind of ignored it and just laughed at it. But whenever we had potential customers to come into the office, my manager would ask, "Where is Sam?" Because he knew that I was dressed professionally. "Sam, will you give them a tour of the facility?" And when a promotional opportunity came available, my manager said, "Although you're the most junior person in the department with the least amount of tenure," he said, you know the job. You look like you're in charge. You might as well be in charge." And I became the manager of the project management team.
That's such great advice from Mom. I really like it.
So I attribute my success in business to my mother.
Oh, that's excellent. That's such great advice. And I hope folks are listening and will pay attention to that. I actually had a colleague of mine from business school who works in California in the digital marketing field, and he went to an interview on the East Coast, which he, was an excellent candidate for, was way probably overqualified for what they needed. And it would have been just such a great job opportunity for him. And he didn't even think about it. He rolled into the interview in jeans because,
oh my goodness,
in California, that's in LA, that's what you do in digital marketing. I mean, it's a very casual environment. And on the East Coast, you do not do that. The people were horrified, and they really couldn't get past his jeans, so he never got an offer from them. And I think it's a really great example of being aware of the cultural differences that may exist from your organization to another, and knowing that when you go to an interview, the most appropriate thing you can always wear is a conservative suit, like you said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, it wouldn't hurt for you to visit the location prior to your interview, just casually, if there's an opportunity, so you can kind of look at how the employees are dressed when they come in and out of the building. Also, make sure that you take an opportunity to travel the route to make sure that you know where you're going, because with construction being the way it is in various cities nowadays, you don't want to assume that you know how to get there and then find out that there's a detour, so now you're late. And since we're talking about your personal brand, you want to be perceived as being very punctual.
Right.
So you don't want to time yourself like you work for the local transportation department, and if your interview is at 1:00, you're gonna get there 5 minutes to 1. Don't do that.
Oh, absolutely.
You should at least allow a half an hour, and you can sit in the car or whatever until 15 minutes till, and then go inside. And I don't even advise you to go in right at 1:00, because you never know if the receptionist has a lot of calls coming through, and they're not able to call your 1:00 appointment to let them know that you're there. So maybe they call at 5 after 1. Already, I'm thinking, if I'm the person you're going to meet with, you're 5 minutes late. And so check in about 15 minutes till, so that it will give the receptionist an opportunity to call and say your 1:00 is here. And they may not call for another 5 or 10 minutes while you're sitting there waiting because they're overwhelmed with calls.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's especially important at a large organization. I know there are a couple of big companies here in Memphis where, you check in with a receptionist in the very front just after you go through security, and someone else has to be dispatched to come and get you, and then they actually take you to another building. So it may be a 10-minute walk to even get to where it is, that you're supposed to be. So you need to be there early for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, is there any other advice that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Yes. As a matter of fact, as it relates to how workers can actually promote their own self-worth, they should continue to work on being a lifelong learner, and don't let their skills get stale. Take a class, pursue an advanced degree, research certificate programs, or identify a mentor. And with educational options growing more customized every day, it's easier than ever to find ways to learn, grow, and challenge themselves long after they graduate from high school or earn a bachelor's degree. And another thing they can do to promote their own self-worth is to get civic. Share their knowledge, nurture their interests, and continue to grow their skills through volunteering. Organizations are looking for individuals who are well-balanced, not only who are skilled skilled in the work that they're doing, but they are also taking on the mindset of being a volunteer. So show them that you have a balanced life, and that also shows qualities of leadership. And another thing they can do is to set personal goals, even if they don't meet everyone. When you go through a review process every year, it is a good time to set some personal learning goals for yourself. Is there something you have always wanted to learn? Is there a part of a business or department that you want to better understand? Are there soft skills such as communication, strategic thinking, or planning that you have always wanted to improve, or identify a personal goal related to your own career and develop a plan to achieve the goal in the coming year? And the final thing is to nurture your brand. We've spent some time today talking about personal branding, but realize that branding isn't just for companies and products. Social media and online networking have made branding just as important for individuals. Research the key components of a business and or marketing plan, and use this as a guide for your own brand and professional communication.
Oh, absolutely. So my very last question for you. So for our listeners today who are interested to learn a little bit more from you, what is the best way that they can reach out to you? Or are you teaching a class that they may consider signing up for?
They can go online to phoenix.edu and choose a program that they want in terms of if it's in business. I am in the School of Business, and they can even look at the curriculum and see what we teach here at University of Phoenix School of Business. And that is the best way to reach me or any of my colleagues in my area.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, thank you, Dr. Sanders, for joining me today. This discussion
Thank you, Angela, for having me.
Yes, this discussion has been very helpful. Thank you to everyone for listening. Please tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.